Broke but still standing. Have you ever stood in front of an ATM, staring at the number on the screen, and felt like the machine just took the air out of your lungs? I have. It was a cold night in the United States, the kind of cold that slips through your jacket and settles into your bones. The parking lot was almost empty. My hands were shaking, not only from the weather, but from one quiet question looping in my head: how much longer can I keep standing like this? If you're exhausted because money is gone and motivation has faded with it, this story is for you. Not to lecture you. Just to sit next to you and say, you're not alone. I came to America without a dramatic glow-up story. No suitcase full of cash. No powerful connections. Just a few changes of clothes, a blurry dream, and English that was good enough to order coffee but not good enough to explain how lost I felt. In the beginning, everything felt expensive. Rent. Gas. Food. Even silence felt costly. You pay for everything here, including your mistakes. And I made plenty. There's something people don't always tell you about the U.S. It doesn't hate you, but it doesn't wait for you either. Everything moves fast. People talk fast. Decisions happen fast. Success stories are fast. And when you move slowly, you start feeling invisible. I remember driving to work early in the morning, sky still dark, the radio playing news I only half understood. Inflation. Rent hikes. Overtime. Those words repeated like background noise, reminding me that money isn't just money. It's safety. And when it disappears, that sense of safety goes with it. That was when my motivation to learn English quietly collapsed. It sounds strange, because everyone says learning is the way out. But when you're tired, your brain doesn't want growth, it wants survival. It just wants to get through the day. I came home from work exhausted, body heavy, mind crowded with worry. I opened an English book, read a few lines, then closed it again. Not because I was lazy. Because at that moment, learning one new word didn't feel like it could pay the next bill. At night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the word broke. It doesn't just mean no money. It means feeling like a failure, even though you tried. It whispers that you're not good enough, not fast enough, not lucky enough. It's very convincing. It sounds like truth. But really, it's just a story your brain tells when it's too tired to imagine another one. What kept me standing wasn't a big plan. There was no 5-year vision board. No motivational quotes taped to the wall. Just one small decision every day: don't collapse today. That was it. I allowed myself to feel sad, but I didn't allow myself to quit completely. I talked to myself in very simple English, almost like a child: just stand. That's enough. No need to run yet. Just stand. One evening after work, I sat in my car for a long time. Engine off. No music. Just sitting. Outside, light snow started falling. And that was when something strange happened. Even with an empty bank account, I was still here. My heart was still beating. I was still breathing. I still had the ability to hope, to love, to learn again from zero. None of that lived in my wallet. It lived inside me. And it hadn't disappeared. Psychology calls this resilience, the ability to recover. When money runs low, the brain treats it like danger. Your nervous system goes into alert mode. You worry more. You learn worse. You quit faster. Not because you're weak, but because your body is trying to protect you. Understanding this helped me stop hating myself. I wasn't failing. I was surviving. Very slowly, I started doing one small thing, listening to very short, very slow English every day. Not to become fluent. Just to remind myself that I was still moving. Real English. The kind people use to talk about the weather, work, daily life. No pressure. No scores. No achievement goals. Just a quiet conversation with myself. If you're at the point where money is gone and motivation feels gone too, remember this, standing is also progress. You don't have to prove anything today. You don't need to transform your life overnight. Just don't break. Because as long as you're still standing, everything else still has a chance to come back. Money can return. Motivation can be rebuilt. But if you're not broken, you're not finished. When money disappears, what keeps you standing isn't magic. It's very small, very human decisions, repeated every day. Sometimes, that's enough to begin again. America wasn't gentle. There is a moment many people don't talk about, the moment after the plane lands and the excitement quietly expires. Not immediately, not at the airport, but a few days later, when real life shows up. For me, that moment came early in the United States. I realized America wasn't cruel, but it also wasn't gentle. It didn't pat you on the back for trying. It simply placed the weight in your hands and watched what you would do with it. I remember my first weeks working here. The buildings were tall, the streets wide, and everything felt loud, even the silence. People walked fast, talked fast, lived fast. I moved slower. Not because I wanted to, but because my mind was constantly translating words, rules, expectations. Every small task took energy. Buying groceries felt like a test. Filling out forms felt like a maze. Even smiling took effort when your head was already full. Money pressure has a special way of draining motivation. It doesn't hit all at once. It leaks. Every bill, every reminder email, every number on a screen slowly pokes a hole in your confidence. You start measuring your worth in hours worked instead of sleep rested. You stop dreaming long-term because tomorrow already feels expensive. And when someone says, just stay positive, it feels like they're speaking from a different planet. I noticed something about myself during that time. I stopped looking up. Literally. My eyes stayed low, on the ground, on my phone, on my worries. It's a small detail, but it matters. Psychologists say posture affects emotion. When your head is down long enough, your thoughts follow. In America, surrounded by movement and ambition, I felt like a paused video. Everything else kept playing while I buffered. The hardest part wasn't physical exhaustion. It was mental. The constant calculation. Can I afford this? Should I skip that? What if something breaks? What if I get sick? When money is thin, your brain becomes a full-time accountant. There's no space left for motivation. No room for language learning, self-improvement, or confidence. Survival eats the schedule. English made this heavier. Not because I didn't know any English, but because I knew just enough to notice what I didn't know. At work, conversations moved fast. Jokes flew past me and landed somewhere behind my head. I laughed late, or not at all. Sometimes I nodded without fully understanding, hoping context would save me. That quiet fear of being exposed, that someone would realize I was struggling, sat in my chest all day. America teaches you independence quickly. No one asks how you're really doing. Not because they don't care, but because everyone is busy holding their own weight. That realization can feel lonely, especially when you're already tired. Back home, struggle feels shared. Here, it feels private. You learn to carry it neatly, silently, like an invisible backpack filled with bricks. One night, after a long shift, I stood at a crosswalk waiting for the light to change. Cars rushed past, headlights blurring into white lines. I felt small. Not unimportant, just small. And oddly, that helped. It reminded me that this system wasn't designed to crush me personally. It was simply big. Bigger than my expectations, my fears, my preparation. Understanding that removed some shame. I wasn't failing. I was adjusting. There's research showing that when people move to a new country, especially under financial stress, their motivation naturally dips before it rises. The brain needs time to rebuild safety. Until then, it prioritizes stability over growth. Knowing this didn't solve my problems, but it softened my self-judgment. I stopped asking, "What's wrong with me?" and started asking, "What do I need right now?" The answer wasn't hustle. It wasn't grinding harder or pushing longer hours just to feel worthy. What I needed was rhythm. Simple routines that made the days predictable when everything else felt uncertain. Wake up. Work. Eat something warm. Listen to a few minutes of slow, real English, nothing fancy, just everyday words. Sleep. Repeat. No pressure to improve fast. Just pressure to stay intact. Slowly, I noticed something shift. Not in my bank account, but in my breathing. When routines exist, the nervous system relaxes. When the nervous system relaxes, motivation has room to return. It doesn't arrive loudly. It whispers. It shows up as curiosity instead of ambition. As consistency instead of excitement. America wasn't gentle with me, but it was honest. It showed me that standing still without breaking is already a form of strength. That you don't need to conquer everything at once. That survival isn't weakness, it's a phase. And phases pass. If you're watching this while feeling crushed by bills, tired of pretending you're fine, remember this. Losing motivation doesn't mean you've lost direction. It just means your mind is protecting you while you adapt. Give yourself permission to move slowly. To learn quietly. To rebuild without announcing it. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do in a hard place is not to shine, but to stay. When English went silent. There is a specific kind of silence that appears when money is low and confidence is gone. It's not the peaceful kind. It's the silence inside your mouth, when words line up in your head but refuse to come out. That was my relationship with English for a long time in America. I could hear it. I could read it. But when it was time to speak, everything froze. As if my language skills had decided to take a break exactly when I needed them most. I remember standing at work, someone asking me a simple question. Nothing complicated. Something I should have known how to answer. I understood every word. But my brain stalled. My heart sped up. My throat tightened. Seconds felt long. Too long. I smiled awkwardly, gave a short reply, and hoped it was enough. Inside, I felt small. Not stupid. Just tired. Tired of always translating, always double-checking, always worrying about sounding wrong. When money is tight, embarrassment feels heavier. You can't afford mistakes. You can't afford misunderstandings. Every interaction feels like a test you didn't sign up for. And English, instead of being a tool, started feeling like a spotlight. It highlighted everything I lacked: fluency, confidence, ease. So I began to avoid it. I spoke less. I chose silence over risk. Silence felt safer. Psychologists call this language anxiety. It's common among immigrants, especially under financial stress. When your brain senses danger, like money running out, it shifts energy away from communication and toward protection. Speaking a second language becomes harder, not because you forgot it, but because your nervous system is busy scanning for threats. Your mind isn't broken. It's overloaded. But knowing that didn't stop the frustration. I felt stuck. I knew English mattered. It was connected to better work, better pay, better understanding. Yet every time I tried to push myself, the pressure backfired. Motivation didn't grow, it shrank. I started thinking maybe I just wasn't a language person. Maybe this was my limit. One evening, after a long day, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of cheap coffee. The room was quiet. Outside, cars passed, people going somewhere. I opened my phone and played a short English clip, just someone talking about their day. Simple words. Slow pace. I didn't repeat anything. I didn't take notes. I just listened. And for the first time in a while, I didn't feel pressure. I felt comfort. That moment changed something small but important. I realized I had been treating English like a performance, not a relationship. Performances demand energy. Relationships allow pauses. When you're broke and exhausted, you don't need another stage. You need something that stays with you quietly. So I changed my approach. I stopped forcing myself to study. Instead, I let English exist around me. In the background. Like music playing softly while you clean the house. I listened while cooking, while driving, while resting. No goal except exposure. No expectation except presence. There's research showing that passive listening reduces anxiety and rebuilds language confidence over time. When the brain feels safe, it learns naturally. When it feels judged, it shuts down. This explained why textbooks made me tense, but real conversations, heard, not spoken, slowly brought English back into my life. Money was still a problem. Bills didn't disappear. Stress didn't vanish. But something shifted inside me. English stopped being another reminder of what I lacked. It became a companion. A quiet one. It didn't ask me to be perfect. It just stayed. I noticed that on days when I listened, even briefly, my thoughts softened. My inner voice became less harsh. Instead of saying, "You're failing," it started saying, "You're learning." That difference matters. Motivation doesn't come from pressure. It comes from permission. Eventually, words returned. Slowly. Incomplete sentences. Simple phrases. Sometimes broken grammar. But they came back. Not because I forced them, but because I gave myself space to breathe. Speaking became less about sounding smart and more about being understood. And that was enough. If you're watching this and feeling like your English has disappeared, like your motivation to learn is gone, understand this: it hasn't left you. It's just waiting for safety. When money is gone, your brain protects you by shutting doors. Your job isn't to kick them open. It's to sit nearby until they open on their own. You don't need confidence to start listening. You don't need motivation to stay curious. You just need gentleness. With your mind. With your pace. With your story. English didn't save me overnight. But it stayed with me when I needed something steady. And sometimes, when everything else feels unstable, that's more than enough. Cold weather, colder reality. The cold in America surprised me, not because of the temperature, but because of what it revealed. Cold has a way of stripping things down. It removes comfort. It removes excuses. It forces you to notice what you've been avoiding. For me, winter in the U.S. arrived at the same time my money ran thin and my motivation quietly disappeared. I remember my first real winter here. The sky felt lower. The days were shorter. The sun seemed to leave early and come back late, like it had better places to be. I layered my clothes before work, but no matter how many jackets I wore, something inside still felt exposed. Cold air filled my lungs, sharp and honest. It didn't care how tired I was. When you're already exhausted, cold weather amplifies everything. Bills feel heavier. Silence feels louder. Loneliness feels closer. Studies show that seasonal cold and low sunlight can reduce dopamine, the chemical connected to motivation. I didn't know the science back then. I just knew that getting out of bed felt harder. Not dramatic. Just heavier. Like gravity had quietly increased overnight. Money problems don't stay at home when you leave for work. They walk with you. They sit beside you on the bus. They wait in the car with the engine off. And in winter, when movement slows and life retreats indoors, there's nowhere to hide from them. I noticed how often my thoughts circled the same questions. How long can I keep this up? What if something goes wrong? Why does everyone else seem fine? The truth was, many people weren't fine. They were just better at hiding it. America teaches you how to function in the cold, physically and emotionally. You learn to smile quickly, talk briefly, keep moving. There's efficiency in it. But when you're broke and unsure, efficiency can feel like distance. I used to stand at the bus stop in the early morning, hands deep in my pockets, watching my breath turn into fog. Each breath visible. Each worry invisible. Cold weather does that. It makes the outside obvious and the inside quiet. In those moments, I realized how much of my identity was tied to momentum. Back home, I was always moving toward something. Here, in winter, I felt paused. Motivation doesn't disappear suddenly. It fades when effort stops feeling meaningful. When the reward is unclear and the cost is constant, the brain starts conserving energy. This isn't weakness. It's biology. Under stress, financial, emotional, environmental, the body prioritizes survival. Learning, dreaming, planning all move to the background. I felt guilty about that. Guilty for not studying English harder. Guilty for not pushing myself more. But guilt didn't warm me up. It didn't help me move. It just added another layer of weight. What helped was noticing something small. Even on the coldest days, I still showed up. I still went to work. I still paid attention. I still listened. Listening became my winter habit. Not active studying. Just listening. To people talk about snowstorms. About traffic. About long shifts and short weekends. Simple English. Real English. The kind people use when they're also tired and just trying to get through the day. It felt familiar. It felt human. There's comfort in shared struggle, even when it's indirect. Hearing someone say, "It's been a long week," reminded me that exhaustion isn't personal. It's universal. Hearing, "I can't wait for spring," reminded me that seasons change even when they feel endless. Winter taught me patience. Not the motivational kind people post online, but the quiet kind that just waits. I stopped expecting myself to feel inspired. Instead, I focused on staying warm, physically and mentally. Warm food. Warm routines. Warm thoughts, even if they were simple. One night, after work, I walked home while snow fell softly. The streetlights turned each snowflake into something visible, something temporary. I realized then that cold doesn't last forever. It feels permanent when you're in it, but it isn't. Neither is being broke. Neither is feeling stuck. Climate affects mood more than we admit. Researchers link cold, dark environments to increased stress and reduced motivation. Knowing this later helped me forgive that version of myself. The one who struggled. the one who slowed down. He wasn't lazy. He was adapting. If you're watching this while dealing with cold weather, real or emotional, remember this: it's okay to move slower in winter. Nature does. Trees don't apologize for losing their leaves. They rest. They conserve. And when the time is right, they grow again. You don't have to bloom in every season. Sometimes, surviving the cold is the work. Sometimes, standing still and staying intact is enough. Motivation will return when warmth does, inside and out. Cold weather showed me a colder reality, yes. But it also showed me resilience. Quiet. Unimpressive. Real. And that kind of strength lasts longer than any season. Love during hard times. Love rarely arrives when life is neat. It doesn't wait for savings accounts to grow or for confidence to fully form. For me, love appeared quietly, during a season when money was low, energy was limited, and my future felt uncertain. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just real. And maybe that's why it mattered so much. I didn't fall in love at my best. I fell in love while tired. While counting expenses. While wondering if I was doing enough, earning enough, becoming enough. There's a myth that love requires stability. But what I learned in America is that love often shows up in instability, when you don't have much to offer except honesty. We met in the middle of ordinary life. No big gestures. No perfect timing. Just two people navigating long days and quiet worries. Conversations were simple. Sometimes awkward. Sometimes slow. My English wasn't strong, and my confidence wasn't either. But somehow, that made the connection more human. There was less performance, more presence. When money is tight, love changes shape. It becomes practical. You talk about groceries instead of vacations. You plan meals instead of trips. You share silence instead of entertainment. And in those small, unglamorous moments, you learn who someone really is. Not when things are easy, but when things are heavy. I remember one evening sitting at a small table, both of us tired from work. No music playing. Just the sound of utensils touching plates. I felt embarrassed about my situation. About how little I could provide. About how uncertain everything felt. But instead of judgment, there was understanding. A look that said, "I see you trying." That look mattered more than money ever could. Psychologists say emotional safety is one of the strongest predictors of relationship resilience. When people feel accepted during hardship, bonds deepen. I didn't know the research then. I just felt it. I felt less alone. And when you're less alone, your nervous system relaxes. When your nervous system relaxes, motivation has space to breathe again. Love didn't erase my financial stress. Bills still came. Work was still exhausting. English was still challenging. But love softened the edges. It gave my days a different texture. Instead of waking up just to survive, I started waking up to share. Even small wins felt bigger when someone noticed them. There were hard conversations too. About expectations. About the future. About fear. Being broke doesn't only test your bank account, it tests your communication. It exposes insecurities. It forces honesty. And honesty isn't always comfortable. But it's real. I had moments where I questioned whether love was responsible. Whether it made sense to build something when the foundation felt shaky. But I learned that foundations aren't always financial. Sometimes they're emotional. Sometimes they're about showing up, listening, staying, even when you're unsure. Language played a quiet role here too. With limited English, I had to simplify my thoughts. Short sentences. Clear feelings. No fancy words. And maybe that made love clearer. Less noise. More truth. I'm tired. I'm worried. I'm trying. Those sentences were enough. In a strange way, love helped me reconnect with English, not as a skill to master, but as a bridge. A way to be understood. A way to understand someone else. I didn't need perfect grammar to express care. I just needed intention. Money stress often tells you that you're a burden. That you should isolate until you're better. Love challenged that lie. It reminded me that value isn't measured in income. That presence matters. That effort counts. That being broke doesn't mean being empty. Research shows that supportive relationships can buffer the psychological effects of financial stress. Love doesn't fix problems, but it makes them feel manageable. Shared stress feels lighter. Shared silence feels safer. Shared hope feels stronger. There were days when motivation still disappeared. Days when I felt like I was dragging myself forward. But love created continuity. Even when I felt stuck, the relationship kept moving. And being part of something moving reminded me that I was still alive, still growing, even if slowly. If you're watching this while feeling like you have nothing to give, remember this: love doesn't require abundance. It requires honesty. It requires showing up as you are, not as who you think you should be. You don't need to be fully healed to be loved. Sometimes love is part of the healing. Hard times reveal character. They strip away performance and leave truth behind. And if love can survive there, quietly, imperfectly, it's not weak. It's strong. Love didn't save me from being broke. But it reminded me that I wasn't broken. And sometimes, that reminder is exactly what keeps you standing. Marriage without money. Marriage sounds steady when people talk about it from a distance. Words like commitment, partnership, future come easily when money is stable and options feel open. But marriage looks different when you're broke. When income is uncertain. When motivation comes and goes. When you're trying to build a life in America while still figuring out how to stand on your own feet. I didn't enter marriage feeling ready. I entered it feeling honest. Honest about my limits. Honest about my fears. Honest about the fact that love alone doesn't pay rent, but rent still needs to be paid. That honesty was uncomfortable, but it was necessary. Because money pressure has a way of exposing everything you try to hide. In America, marriage carries expectations, spoken and unspoken. Stability. Independence. Progress. You're supposed to move forward together, upward, efficiently. And when you can't, you start questioning yourself. Am I slowing us down? Am I enough? Am I becoming a weight instead of a partner? Those questions don't shout. They whisper, late at night, when the house is quiet. I remember sitting together, looking at numbers on a screen. Bills. Due dates. No drama. No arguing. Just silence. That silence felt heavy. Not angry, just tired. When money is tight, conversations shrink. You stop talking about dreams and start talking about costs. You stop asking what if and start asking how much. Marriage under financial stress tests your emotional muscles. It demands patience when patience feels expensive. It demands communication when words feel risky. One wrong sentence can sound like blame. One tired tone can sound like disappointment. And when English isn't your first language, that risk feels even bigger. There were moments I wanted to withdraw. To protect myself. To stay quiet so I wouldn't say the wrong thing. But silence, over time, builds distance. And distance is dangerous in marriage, especially when both people are already under pressure. Psychology research shows that financial stress is one of the leading predictors of relationship conflict, not because money matters more than love, but because stress reduces emotional regulation. When the brain is overloaded, empathy drops. You react faster. You listen less. Understanding this helped me see our struggles differently. We weren't failing. We were stressed. So we slowed down. Conversations became simpler. Shorter. More direct. I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I need time. Those sentences don't sound impressive, but they're strong. They keep connection alive when everything else feels unstable. Marriage taught me something important about motivation. You don't always get motivated before you act. Sometimes action comes first. You show up. You talk. You listen. And motivation follows quietly, later. Not as excitement, but as responsibility. Responsibility to another human being who is also trying. Money problems made me feel small, but marriage made me feel seen. Even on days when I felt useless, I mattered to someone. That matters more than we admit. Studies show that feeling valued increases resilience under stress. It doesn't remove the problem, but it changes how you carry it. English continued to play a subtle role. With limited vocabulary, I learned to speak emotionally, not perfectly. I learned that tone matters more than grammar. That sincerity travels faster than fluency. Marriage didn't require polished language. It required truth. There were days we disagreed. Days we misunderstood each other. Days when exhaustion won. But there was also consistency. Coming home. Eating together. Checking in. Those routines became anchors. When money fluctuated, routines stayed. And stability doesn't always come from income. Sometimes it comes from predictability. I used to think marriage was about building a future. Now I think it's also about surviving the present together. About choosing us when individual confidence is low. About staying when leaving would be easier emotionally, but more damaging long-term. If you're married, or thinking about it, while feeling financially drained, hear this: struggling doesn't make you a bad partner. Avoiding honesty does. You don't need all the answers to stay connected. You just need openness and patience. Especially patience with yourself. Marriage didn't magically fix my money situation. It didn't restore my motivation overnight. But it gave my effort context. I wasn't just standing for myself anymore. I was standing for something shared. And that made standing easier. When money is gone, marriage reveals what's left. Not comfort. Not security. But commitment in its raw form. Quiet. Imperfect. Real. And if that commitment holds, it becomes a foundation stronger than numbers. I was broke. Motivation was fragile. But inside the marriage, I learned that being steady doesn't mean being strong all the time. Sometimes it just means staying together until the pressure passes. Working to survive. There is a kind of work you do not to grow, not to shine, but simply to stay upright. This was the kind of work I did in America for a long time. Not the work you brag about. Not the work you post online. The kind of work that quietly keeps the lights on and the body moving, even when motivation has already packed its bags and left. I remember waking up before sunrise, the alarm cutting through sleep that never felt deep enough. My body moved before my mind agreed. Outside, the sky was still dark, streets mostly empty, like the world hadn't fully decided to begin yet. In those moments, work felt less like a career and more like a lifeline. Something to hold on to while everything else felt unstable. When money is low, work becomes emotional. Every shift carries weight. Every hour feels counted. You're not just working for a paycheck, you're working to reduce anxiety, to delay fear, to buy yourself a little more time. And when the job isn't meaningful, that pressure doubles. You're tired and questioning why you're tired. I didn't hate my work. But I didn't love it either. It was functional. It required presence more than passion. And that was okay, though it took time to accept. There's a cultural story in America about loving what you do. But no one talks enough about the dignity of doing what you must. English followed me into the workplace like a shadow. Instructions. Small talk. Safety rules. Everything moved fast. I listened carefully, sometimes too carefully, afraid of missing something important. Mistakes felt expensive, not just financially, but emotionally. One misunderstanding could mean embarrassment, correction, or worse, losing trust. Working in a second language while under financial stress is exhausting in a unique way. Your brain is always on. Translating. Filtering. Predicting. There's research showing that cognitive load increases significantly when using a non-native language, especially under pressure. No wonder I came home drained, even when the work itself wasn't physically heavy. Motivation didn't show up at work as excitement. It showed up as reliability. I arrived on time. I did what was asked. I paid attention. That became my quiet standard. Not excellence, consistency. And consistency, I learned, is underrated. It builds stability when everything else feels unpredictable. There were days when I questioned whether this was all there would ever be. Work, sleep, repeat. That question is dangerous when you're tired. It turns fatigue into hopelessness. I had to learn to separate this is my current situation from this is my forever. They feel similar when you're exhausted, but they are not the same. One afternoon, during a short break, I watched coworkers talk and laugh. They complained about traffic, schedules, the weather. Normal things. And I realized something important. They weren't defined by this job either. They were surviving too. Some louder. Some quieter. But no one was immune to pressure. That realization changed how I viewed work. It wasn't a verdict on my worth. It was a phase. A chapter. Not the whole book. And chapters don't have to be exciting to be necessary. Psychologically, having any form of structured work can protect mental health during financial stress. Routine reduces uncertainty. Predictability calms the nervous system. Even if the job isn't your dream, it can be a stabilizer. Understanding this helped me stop resenting work and start using it as an anchor. I began pairing work with small acts of self-respect. Eating properly when I could. Resting when possible. Listening to slow, real English on the commute, not to study, just to stay connected. These habits didn't make me rich or inspired. But they kept me intact. There were moments of quiet pride too. Solving a small problem. Being trusted with a task. Receiving a simple thank you. Those moments didn't change my financial situation, but they restored a bit of dignity. And dignity fuels endurance. If you're working right now just to survive, know this, survival work is still work. It still counts. It still builds strength, even if it doesn't feel like progress. You're training patience. You're learning resilience. You're proving to yourself that you can show up when things are hard. Motivation doesn't always look like ambition. Sometimes it looks like persistence without applause. Like waking up again. Like doing the job one more day. Like not quitting when quitting feels logical. Working to survive taught me that standing doesn't always feel heroic. Sometimes it feels boring. Repetitive. Quiet. But quiet strength lasts. And one day, when pressure eases, you realize that this phase didn't break you, it trained you. Money was still tight. Motivation still fragile. But through work, I stayed connected to life. To people. To rhythm. And that connection mattered more than I understood at the time. If you're in this season now, keep standing. This isn't the end. It's the ground you're learning to stand on. Paperwork and pressure. No one prepares you for how heavy paper can feel when you're broke. Not the physical weight, but the mental one. Forms. Letters. Emails with serious subject lines. In America, paperwork doesn't just organize life, it controls it. And when money is low and motivation is thin, each document feels like a quiet test you're afraid to fail. I remember opening envelopes slowly, as if speed might make the news worse. Bills. Notices. Requests for information. Everything written in formal English, polite but firm. The kind of language that doesn't ask how you're doing. It just tells you what's due, what's missing, what's required. Reading those letters took energy I didn't always have. Sometimes I let them sit unopened for a day, not because I didn't care, but because I needed time to breathe first. Paperwork in a second language adds another layer of pressure. You don't just read, you decode. You look for keywords. Deadlines. Consequences. One misunderstood sentence can mean delays, fees, or lost opportunities. And when you're already stretched financially, mistakes feel dangerous. There's no margin for error when there's no margin in your account. I noticed how my body reacted every time I saw official mail. Tight shoulders. Shallow breathing. A familiar heaviness in the chest. That's not laziness or avoidance, that's stress. Chronic stress narrows attention. It makes decision-making harder. Research shows that financial pressure reduces cognitive bandwidth, making even simple tasks feel overwhelming. Paperwork became hard not because it was complex, but because my mind was already full. There were days when I thought, why does everything require proof? Proof of income. Proof of address. Proof of identity. Proof of eligibility. When you're struggling, constantly proving yourself can feel humiliating. As if your existence needs validation. As if standing here isn't enough. But slowly, I learned something important. Paperwork isn't personal. It feels personal when you're vulnerable, but it isn't. It's a system built for order, not empathy. Understanding that helped me separate my worth from the process. I wasn't failing as a person, I was navigating a system not designed for emotional comfort. Still, motivation took a hit. Each form felt like another reminder of how far I had to go. How much I didn't know. How dependent I felt on rules written by strangers. It's hard to feel inspired when your days revolve around compliance instead of creativity. So I adjusted my approach. I stopped trying to do everything at once. I broke tasks down to the smallest possible step. Not finish the form, but read the first page. Not solve everything, but send one email. These micro-actions mattered. Neuroscience shows that completing small tasks releases dopamine, rebuilding motivation gradually. I didn't need momentum, I needed traction. English played a role here too. I stopped trying to understand every word perfectly. I focused on meaning. On action. On what was actually required. When needed, I asked questions. Simple questions. Clear questions. Asking for help felt uncomfortable at first. But confusion costs more than humility. There's a quiet courage in asking for clarification when you're tired. In saying, "I don't understand yet." In admitting you're learning while under pressure. That courage doesn't look dramatic, but it's real. And it adds up. Paperwork also taught me patience. Things moved slowly. Approvals took time. Waiting became part of the process. Waiting without guarantees. That's hard when money is tight. Every delay feels risky. But waiting taught me restraint, the ability to pause without panicking. To trust that not everything needs immediate action to survive. I began pairing paperwork days with kindness toward myself. After finishing a form, I rested. After making a call, I ate something warm. Small rewards. Not because the task was heroic, but because effort deserves acknowledgement. Motivation grows where effort is noticed. Pressure didn't disappear. But my relationship with it changed. Instead of seeing paperwork as proof that life was against me, I saw it as evidence that I was participating. That I was still in the system. Still moving forward, even slowly. If you're watching this and feeling buried under documents, emails, deadlines, hear this: struggling with paperwork doesn't mean you're incompetent. It means you're human under stress. Systems are cold by design. You don't have to internalize that coldness. Take it one page at a time. One sentence at a time. One decision at a time. You're allowed to be slow. You're allowed to learn as you go. Standing still while figuring things out is still standing. Paperwork added pressure, yes. But it also showed me something unexpected. Even when I felt powerless, I was still responding. Still adapting. Still present. And presence, under pressure, is strength. When money is gone, pressure feels louder. But pressure doesn't define you. How you move through it, quietly, imperfectly, persistently, that's what lasts. When the silence gets loud. There was a season when my life became very quiet. Not peaceful quiet, an uncomfortable kind. The kind where the phone doesn't ring, messages slow down, and opportunities feel like they're happening somewhere else, to someone else. When money is tight, silence feels threatening. It whispers questions you don't want to answer. Am I falling behind? Did I miss my chance? Does anyone still see me? In the United States, productivity is loud. Success announces itself. People talk about growth, upgrades, next steps. So when your own life goes silent, it feels like failure. I remember sitting in my car after work, engine off, just staring at the steering wheel. I didn't want to go inside yet. Inside meant thinking. Inside meant facing the same questions I'd been avoiding all day. Silence magnifies exhaustion. When you're busy, at least your mind has somewhere to go. But when things slow down, every worry has space to stretch. Financial stress doesn't only drain your wallet, it drains your sense of direction. You start measuring time differently. Not by goals, but by survival. Rent cycles. Grocery trips. Gas prices. Days blur together. What made it harder was that nothing was wrong in a dramatic way. No big disaster. No sudden collapse. Just a long, quiet struggle. And that kind of struggle doesn't get applause. It doesn't even get recognition. It just sits with you. I noticed how my motivation changed during that silence. I still showed up. I still worked. But the spark was gone. Tasks felt heavier. Decisions took longer. I wasn't dreaming much anymore. I was maintaining. And maintenance, when it lasts too long, can feel like stagnation. Psychologists call this decision fatigue. When resources are low, the brain conserves energy by narrowing focus. You stop imagining futures because the present demands everything. That's not weakness, it's biology. But knowing that didn't make it easier emotionally. At night, silence was the loudest. My spouse would fall asleep, and I'd lie there listening to the hum of the heater, the distant sound of traffic. I'd think about the life we thought we'd have by now. The plans that felt reasonable once. The promises we made when hope was cheaper. Marriage under financial pressure changes tone. Conversations become shorter. Laughter becomes careful. You're both tired, but in different ways. You don't want to burden each other, so you carry things alone, together, but separate. Silence grows there too. One night, I realized something unsettling. I was starting to confuse quiet with uselessness. Because nothing visible was happening, I assumed nothing valuable was happening either. But that wasn't true. Growth doesn't always make noise. Sometimes it happens underground. Roots don't announce themselves. They work in darkness, slowly, without applause. Silence, I learned, can be a sign of preparation, not absence. I began to pay attention to small internal shifts. How I reacted to stress. How quickly I recovered after disappointment. How I spoke to myself when no one else was listening. These things don't show up on resumes or bank statements, but they matter deeply. English, too, felt quieter during this time. I wasn't practicing actively. I wasn't improving dramatically. But I was listening, constantly. Conversations at work. Radio voices. Casual exchanges. Language was soaking in, even when I wasn't aware of it. Learning doesn't always feel like progress while it's happening. To cope with the silence, I changed how I measured days. Instead of asking, what did I achieve? I asked, what did I endure without breaking? Endurance doesn't feel impressive, but it builds resilience. And resilience is what carries you when motivation disappears. I also learned to sit with silence without fighting it. Not every quiet moment needs filling. Not every pause is a problem. Sometimes, silence is your nervous system asking for rest. Financial stress keeps the body in constant alert. Silence can be the first step back to balance. There were moments when I wanted reassurance. A sign. A clear answer. But life didn't offer that. What it offered instead was consistency. Another day survived. Another bill paid, barely. Another conversation held together with patience. These were not victories I could post about, but they were real. If you're watching this and your life feels painfully quiet right now, hear this clearly. Silence does not mean you are invisible. It means your story is between chapters. And the space between chapters is where understanding deepens. You are not behind. You are not erased. You are resting in a world that rarely allows rest. And even if you don't feel motivated, the fact that you're still here, still listening, still hoping quietly, that matters more than you think. When money is gone, noise fades. But what remains in the silence is your core. And that core, your values, your endurance, your capacity to keep showing up, cannot be taken from you. Silence can feel like an ending. But sometimes, it's the sound of something gathering strength before it speaks again. The day I stopped asking for motivation. There was a morning when I realized I wasn't waiting for opportunity anymore. I was waiting for motivation. And it wasn't coming. I stood in the kitchen, holding a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. Outside, the sky was gray in that familiar American way, wide, quiet, undecided. I looked at the clock, then at the floor, then nowhere in particular. I felt empty, but not in a dramatic way. Just tired. Tired of pushing. Tired of hoping. Tired of telling myself, just try harder. When money runs low for too long, motivation becomes a luxury. People talk about finding your why, but when you're exhausted, your why feels distant. Abstract. Bills don't care about your why. Hunger doesn't wait for inspiration. And over time, that gap between what you need to do and what you feel able to do becomes painful. I noticed how often I blamed myself for not feeling motivated. As if motivation were a moral trait. As if lacking it meant I was lazy, ungrateful, or broken. But the truth was simpler and harder. My nervous system was worn out. Constant financial pressure had kept it in survival mode for months, maybe years. You can't expect creativity from a system designed only to survive. That morning, something small shifted. I stopped asking, how do I get motivated? And started asking, what can I do without motivation? The answer was, very little. But that little was enough. I went to work. Not with enthusiasm. Not with dreams. Just with presence. I focused on the next task, not the next goal. I stopped imagining a better future and paid attention to the moment in front of me, the sound of footsteps, the weight of tools. The rhythm of routine. It wasn't exciting, but it was grounding. In American culture, we're taught to chase passion. To love what we do. To hustle with purpose. But no one talks enough about the seasons when passion disappears, and how normal that is. Especially under financial strain. Especially when you're an immigrant, carrying the extra weight of adaptation, language, and cultural distance. During this time, my marriage felt quieter too. Not distant, but subdued. We talked about logistics more than dreams. Groceries. Rent. Schedules. Our love didn't fade, it went into maintenance mode. And maintenance isn't romantic, but it's honest. It's what keeps things alive when conditions are harsh. One evening, my spouse said something simple: "You don't have to be inspired. You just have to be here." That stayed with me. Being here. Not winning. Not advancing. Just staying. I began to see that motivation often follows action, not the other way around. But action doesn't have to be big. It can be neutral. Almost mechanical. You show up, not because you believe, but because you decided to continue. English learning fit into this shift naturally. I stopped trying to improve. I just used the language to get through the day. Simple sentences. Familiar phrases. No pressure to sound impressive. Communication, not perfection. And without noticing, my confidence grew, not because I tried, but because I stopped judging myself. There's a strange freedom in accepting low motivation. When you stop fighting it, it loses some of its power. You stop wasting energy on guilt and start conserving it for essentials. That conservation is wisdom, not weakness. I also learned to redefine progress. Progress wasn't moving forward, it was not collapsing. It was paying one bill. Cooking one meal. Having one honest conversation. Progress was quiet, almost invisible. But it was real. Neuroscience tells us that prolonged stress shrinks our sense of future. That's why motivation fades. Your brain is protecting you from disappointment by narrowing focus to the present. Understanding this helped me forgive myself. I wasn't failing at motivation, my brain was doing its job. So I worked with it instead of against it. I created routines that required no inspiration. Same wake-up time. Same route. Same simple meals. Routine reduced decision-making, and reduced decisions saved energy. Slowly, stability replaced chaos. And stability, over time, creates space for hope to return. There were still hard days. Days when the weight came back. Days when I questioned everything. But I stopped expecting myself to feel inspired during a crisis. That expectation had been another burden. If you're watching this and wondering why you can't find motivation anymore, listen closely. Motivation is not the foundation. Stability is. Safety is. Rest is. When those are missing, motivation doesn't disappear because you're weak, it disappears because you're human. You don't need to feel driven to keep going. You don't need clarity. You don't need passion. Sometimes, all you need is permission to continue without enthusiasm. And that kind of continuation, the quiet, stubborn kind, is powerful. It doesn't look impressive. It doesn't make noise. But it builds a life that can hold joy again when the pressure eases. When money is gone, motivation often leaves with it. But what remains? Your ability to stay, to adapt, to keep placing one foot in front of the other. That's deeper than motivation. That's endurance. And endurance, even without excitement, can carry you further than you think. When hope came back quietly. Hope didn't come back like a movie scene. There was no dramatic phone call. No sudden bank deposit. No moment where music swelled and everything made sense. It came back quietly. Almost shy. So quietly that if I hadn't been paying attention, I would have missed it. It happened on an ordinary afternoon in the United States, the kind of afternoon that feels stretched and flat. The sun was out, but not warm enough to feel generous. I was sitting in the car, parked outside a grocery store, counting change in my hand. Not metaphorically, literally. Coins. Quarters and dimes clinking softly, like they were embarrassed to be noticed. I wasn't panicking anymore. That surprised me. Months earlier, this exact moment would have crushed me. The sight of loose change would have triggered shame, anger, self-blame. My chest would tighten. My thoughts would spiral. How did I get here? What kind of adult lives like this? But that day, my body stayed calm. Not happy. Not proud. Just calm. That's when I realized something important had shifted. Not my financial situation, but me. When you've been broke for a long time, exhaustion changes shape. At first, it's loud. Anxious. Heavy. Later, it becomes quiet and dull, like background noise you stop reacting to. Somewhere in that quiet, resilience can grow, not the motivational kind, but the steady kind. I walked into the store and bought exactly what I needed. No more. No less. Simple food. Practical choices. I wasn't dreaming about abundance anymore. I was practicing sufficiency. And sufficiency, I learned, is a powerful teacher. At home, my spouse noticed it too. Not in words, but in energy. We laughed more easily. Not big laughs, small ones. Shared glances. Inside jokes about nothing. Financial stress was still there, but it no longer occupied every inch of the room. We had learned how to live around it. Marriage under pressure reveals everything. Not just love, but habits. Reactions. Expectations you didn't know you had. We had argued before, not explosively, but quietly, in tired tones. About money. About responsibility. About fear. But over time, those arguments softened into conversations. Not because things got easier, but because we stopped fighting reality. One night, we talked about the future again. Carefully. Like handling something fragile. No big plans. Just possibilities. Maybe next year. Maybe not. But the fact that we could even say next year felt significant. That's another thing people don't tell you. Hope often returns after you stop chasing it. When you stop demanding answers. When you stop asking life to explain itself. English became part of this quiet return too. I noticed that I was understanding more without effort. Jokes at work. Casual comments. Signs on the road. I wasn't studying harder. I was simply living longer in the language. Exposure, not pressure, did the work. That's how real learning happens, especially when you're tired. Not through force, but through familiarity. Your brain relaxes, and when it relaxes, it absorbs. Neuroscience supports this. When stress hormones decrease, the brain regains access to long-term thinking and language processing. In simple terms, when you're not constantly afraid, you learn better. That's why kindness toward yourself isn't a luxury, it's a strategy. Hope didn't make me ambitious. It made me patient. I stopped measuring success by speed. I stopped comparing my timeline to others. In America, comparison is everywhere: social media, career culture, even casual conversations. But comparison drains hope faster than poverty ever could. Instead, I measured my days by honesty. Did I show up truthfully? Did I rest when I needed to? Did I speak kindly, even when I felt small? These became my metrics. There were still moments of doubt. Hope doesn't erase fear, it coexists with it. Some mornings, fear woke up first. But hope stayed longer now. It didn't leave at the first sign of discomfort. I realized that being not broken didn't mean being strong all the time. It meant being flexible. Letting go of who I thought I should be, and accepting who I was becoming. If you're listening and wondering when your hope will return, here's the honest answer: it might not announce itself. It might show up as calm instead of excitement. As steadiness instead of passion. As the ability to breathe without panic. That counts. You don't need to feel optimistic to be healing. You don't need confidence to move forward. Sometimes, the most hopeful thing you can do is stop fighting the present and let it pass through you. Money may still be gone. Answers may still be unclear. But if you're still here, still listening, still breathing, still taking care of the small things, then something important is already happening. Hope isn't pushing you forward anymore. It's walking beside you. And that kind of hope? It lasts. What remains when everything is gone? There is a strange clarity that comes only after you've lost enough. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But piece by piece of money, confidence, certainty, plans. What remains isn't what you expected. For me, it wasn't strength in the heroic sense. It wasn't sudden success or a clean ending. It was something quieter. Something slower. Something that felt almost invisible until I looked back and realized it had been carrying me the whole time. I was still living in the United States. Still working. Still paying bills one careful step at a time. Life hadn't magically improved, but it had stabilized. And stability, after chaos, feels like mercy. One evening, I walked alone through my neighborhood. The houses looked the same as always. Lawns trimmed. Lights warm behind windows. Somewhere, a TV played softly. Somewhere else, someone laughed. America felt ordinary again, not intimidating, not overwhelming. Just a place where people were living their lives, imperfectly. I realized I no longer felt like I was falling behind. I wasn't catching up either. I was simply where I was. That acceptance didn't come from success. It came from survival. When money is gone for a long time, it strips away illusions. You stop pretending. You stop performing. You stop trying to impress an imaginary audience. What remains is honesty, sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes freeing. I saw myself more clearly. Not as a failure, not as a hero. Just as a person who had been tested and was still here. My marriage reflected that clarity. We weren't the same people we were before the hardship. We were quieter. More deliberate. We listened better. We argued less, not because everything was resolved, but because we learned which battles weren't worth the cost. Love, I learned, isn't proven in comfort. It's proven in patience. In shared silence. In choosing kindness when neither of you has much left to give. Even our conversations about the future changed. We stopped asking, what do we want, and started asking, what can we handle? That question grounded us. It made our plans realistic. Humane. English, this language that once felt like a wall, became a bridge. Not because I mastered it, but because I stopped fearing it. I spoke simply. I listened carefully. I accepted mistakes. Language stopped being a test and became a tool. If you're learning English through stories like this, remember, fluency grows faster when shame is gone. You don't need perfect words to express a real life. Real life is the lesson. Psychology has a term for what happens after prolonged stress, post-adversity growth. It doesn't mean trauma was good. It means adaptation changes you. Your values shift. Your priorities sharpen. You stop wasting energy on things that don't sustain you. That's what happened to me. I stopped chasing validation. I stopped waiting for permission. I stopped asking money to define my worth. When everything was gone, what remained was my ability to choose my next small action. That choice, quiet, uncelebrated, was enough. If you're watching this and you're broke, exhausted, and questioning yourself, hear this clearly, you are not weak for feeling this way. Your fatigue is evidence of endurance, not failure. You're tired because you've been strong for too long without rest. And if you're still standing, still listening, still trying to understand your life through stories, language, meaning, then something inside you hasn't given up. Even if you think it has. The title of this story asks a question: what keeps you standing when money is gone? For me, the answer wasn't motivation. It wasn't confidence. It wasn't optimism. It was presence. It was routine. It was love that stayed when everything else was uncertain. It was the decision, repeated daily, to remain human in a system that often reduces people to numbers. Standing doesn't always look like progress. Sometimes it looks like rest. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like doing less and forgiving yourself more. This is not a story about becoming rich. It's a story about becoming grounded. And grounding, once you have it, can't be taken away as easily as money. If this story feels familiar, it's because many people are living it quietly. You're not alone. You never were. You're just earlier, or later, on the same path. So take a breath. Lower your shoulders. Let today be enough. You don't need to win. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to stay. And staying, softly, stubbornly, is sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do. If you're still here, still listening, that means something in this story touched a quiet place inside you. Maybe it wasn't the details. Maybe it was the feeling. The feeling of being tired but not defeated. Broke, but still standing. Still trying to understand life, love, money, and yourself, one slow step at a time. This story doesn't end because the struggle disappears. It ends because you realize you are still here. And that matters more than you think. If you're learning English, rebuilding your motivation, or just trying to survive a difficult season in the United States, or anywhere in the world, this channel is for you. Here, we don't rush. We don't fake positivity. We learn real English through real stories, emotions, relationships, and everyday life. Slowly. Clearly. Humanly. In the next videos, I'll share more true-to-life English stories about money stress, marriage under pressure, cultural differences in America, quiet resilience, and how ordinary people keep going when life feels heavy. Each story is designed to help you practice listening, reading, and speaking English naturally, without pressure, without shame. So if this video gave you even a small sense of calm, clarity, or connection, like the video so more people who feel the same way can find it. Subscribe to the channel to continue this journey together. And save or share this video if you think someone else needs to hear it tonight. Because sometimes, the right story at the right moment can keep someone standing. And the next story might be yours.